Good evening, good evening, good evening, all. Welcome to the call. Welcome to the call. If you can, please announce your name and where you're calling in from.
Tyrese Down in New York City.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Who else we have on the
Elton
call?
Campbell, New York.
Welcome, welcome,
Kathy Jewel, Houston, Texas.
welcome, welcome.
Ambrose Thomas, Georgia.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to the call.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let's go ahead and make our final Texas final calls before we go ahead and get started with this amazing call and training tonight. If you haven't already done so, please announce your name and where you're calling in from.
Leroy from St. Louis.
Welcome, welcome. And while we wait, anyone want to share a few wins for the week that they've had so far? Just while we wait, we'll be getting started shortly. Any wins? Any wins anyone would like to share?
Great evening, Mr. Idris.
Great evening, great evening. Welcome to the call. Any wins? I know there's some wins out there. Gotta be a few. Would anyone like to share at all? All right. No problem. We'll be getting started shortly in a few minutes. So just please make your last final text messages, message out, send your last final text messages that you're going to send out. Also, last final calls that you'll send out as well before we go ahead and get started with the call today. We have a great one for those who are out in the field, speaking to people on a regular basis every day. Literally wanting to have a better perspective of how to speak with people and get people up and speak their language to them, as far as what benefits them and what they're looking for to make that switch to solar. So whether you're making cold calls, whether you're making warm market calls, hot market calls, whoever you're speaking to, we're definitely going to have a great approach for you today. So if you haven't already done so, please announce where you're calling in from and let us know, who you are and where you're calling in from. Don't be shy.
Hey Idris, this is Victor Bushfire calling you from the plugging in from the DMV, man. How you doing, sir?
I am amazing and highly blessed.
Glad
Thank
to
you.
hear it, brother.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. All right. All right. All right. First and foremost, want to say I appreciate everyone jumping on the line on time. Just want to show my respect to those of you who have jumped online right on time. Appreciate that, and we'll be getting started shortly, just in a few minutes. So if you haven't already done so, please announce your name and where you're calling in from. We have people logging in from Zoom. We have people logging in from Facebook. We have people logging in all over. So yes, welcome.
Sandra Young, Brooklyn, New York.
Miss Young, welcome to the call. Welcome to the call.
Thought you were in Barbados.
Well, I didn't want to make you guys jealous, but
Nice, nice, nice.
Good
You gotta-
evening, Leslie Johnson, South Carolina.
Welcome to the call. Welcome to the call.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So we'll be
Great
getting
evening, Mr. Alak. I apologize for my tardiness.
no worries, no worries. Appreciate you being on the call. Welcome. Welcome, welcome.
Just got off a three-way.
Nice, beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
I know it went well.
thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, team. So it is 7:05. I am gonna go ahead and get started. Once again, definitely appreciate everyone who's jumped on the line today. For those who jumped on time, everyone's on time now. We just give it a few minutes for some of the people to come in. But I definitely appreciate everyone for jumping on. Could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us today. Getting educated on more about the solar industry, and literally how to be in a better position to speak the language of your clients, right? And that's what this is all going to be about. So once again, as I mentioned, whether you make cold calls, whether you're calling to the hot market or to the warm market, this is going to be really for you. And I also want to start off by saying this is going to be a very interactive call, right? So I'm not sure if you guys know and or but when you have the cameras off, literally it looks like I'm speaking to myself, right? So I'm not sure who's on and who's not, but this is going to be a very interactive call. So what I'll ask is that if you are in a position to have your cameras on, please do, just so I know I'm not speaking to myself. As a person who presents, they definitely feed off of the energy and the audience that they're speaking with. So once again, if you are in a position where you can put your camera on, please do. And if you're driving, once again, keep your camera off, right? Want to make sure that you are safe and you're in a position where, you can make it to your destination okay. But once again, just starting off now, we want to talk about once again the different perspectives of closing a solar deal, and this is not even really about closing deals. We should have renamed the title a little bit, but this is going to be more about once again just speaking your client's language, right? So this happens prior to the deal as the appointment is being booked, in addition to in the meeting, during the consultation when that's a solar specialist is actually presenting to the client, and then even afterwards, right? So once again, we don't have a bunch of slides, but what you will need a pen and a piece of paper to jot some of these things down. And for someone who is listening on the line, if you could, just help me out. Well, help out by writing. Well, I have some notes here. And I'm not the type to have a bunch of slides and PowerPoints and all of those things. I really like speaking from the heart, and speaking from what I know and from my experience as well. So let me dig into some of these things. So once again, when we say different perspectives, obviously, as you know, and have some of you have had, I should say, solar consultations where where you spoken to clients. You know that I always say, right? No solar consultation is the same. And that's for a variety of reasons, right? So some people may think, okay, well, no solar consultation is the same, because we're dealing with different homeowners. Well, that's true. Other people may say, well, no solar consultation is the same because we're not dealing with the same house. Well, once again, that's also true as well. But probably most importantly, no solar consultation is the same because people's wants and needs are very different, right? And as you speak to different people, they're going to come from a different perspective. And this is exactly what we're going to talk about today. So I want to train from a position where when you're speaking to your prospective clients, once again, cold market, warm market, hot market, you're going to listen out. I want you to listen out for trigger words or target words, I should say, right? And as you hear these target words, you'll know how to respond to them to once again speak their language to move them in the direction to basically to book an appointment, right? Or to close a deal, right? So as you guys realize, for those who've had consultations with me, there's a lot of questions that I ask, right? And the reason for asking all of these questions is so I can get as much information from the client so I know how to present to them. So if you heard me say this before, a consultation is kind of like a doctor's visit. right? When you go to the doctor, you explain to the doctor what's wrong, how you feel, not necessarily that something's wrong, but you explain to the doctor how you feel, right? And then the doctor may prescribe something to you, right? Whether that's medicine or, an exercise or whatever the case may be. So I take the same approach when making phone calls, right? And also, obviously, in a consultation. So we ask a lot of questions. I find out what that homeowner is most interested in, and then I prescribe, right, a specific focus and a specific angle to that client. So once again, the reason why I say, this is going to be participation, because I'm actually going to reach out to a couple of you, just for your as an example, right? From some of the consultations that we've had, just so you can kind of give some of your experience as well, right? So first and foremost, let's jump into it. So different perspective. These are in no specific order at all, right? I'm literally talking from, a bunch of different thoughts that I had, right? And then maybe a few others, but these are some of the main ones, right? So different perspectives. Perspective number one, a homeowner will go solar because of environmental reasons, right? Now, this is a very critical, topic. And, I'm speaking about this right now due to everything that's going on in California, right? So, the reason why I should say, decide to focus on solar is because it's a hot topic just in general, right? When you speak to solar, whether you're speaking to a homeowner, whether you're not speaking to a homeowner, most people they have they've heard about solar. They may not understand it, but they've heard about it, right? So it can actually allow you to, lead into a conversation. But just to stay on track, once again, environmental reasons. So you may have someone who says, you know what, I want to go solar because I want to, be a positive benefit to the world, right? Now, I'll be honest with you. Most people may not say that, right? Most people, their angle of going solar is going to be probably more geared towards a financial situation. It's almost for sure, right? But you will have some clients who don't care about the financial aspect. They want to do it for the greater good. Now, once again, I know this may sound, maybe a little far-fetched, but I remember, and it sticks in my mind when I first got started in the solar industry. I think it was maybe my third or fourth client that I actually got. She told me she didn't care what the price was, right? She didn't care what the finance amount was, as long as it was reasonable. She wanted to go solar to make sure that she could do her part in reducing the carbon footprint, right? And that, it was an eye-opening moment for me because it made me realize, wow, I'm not just at a job right now, just selling this thing, right? I'm actually working with the company, right? At the time, all right, roughly 10 years ago, it was Tesla, for anyone who's wondering. But I'm actually working with the company who's has a much bigger purpose, right? And who's really looking to change the world, right? So the reality of that was, and to get to the point, her reasoning for going solar was environmental, right? So you're going to have some people who speak that language, and you want to make sure you can actually speak that language back, right? So for those, and this is also something that, stood out to me recently. And I don't want to go through a whole bunch of slides because I'll have slides literally all over the place. But if you've seen my solar consultation, there's a slide in there that talks about wildfires. Now, I don't really touch on it much and focus on it. Let me see. Anyone seen that slide? Does anyone know what slide I'm referring to? No, no, no. Okay. One thumbs up. All right. So let me show you guys real quick. Right? And once again, I'm not going to go through a bunch of slides because we'll be here forever. But literally this slide right here, right? So in this slide, you see it talks about reducing, right, wildfires, right? And it talks about how the increasing rates are, going up. So I want to start this training off by showing you how real this is, right? What's going on in California right now? I'm not blaming it. Well, yeah, what's going on in California right now? You may hear a lot of different reports on a lot of different things, and this is not the training for that. But my point is that what we're doing on a day-to-day basis is literally saving lives, right? So here's the article right here. It's in the presentation. But because of what's going on, I now get a chance to, speak on this and focus on this a little bit more, and it will resonate with people definitely moving forward as this continues to go, happen. For those who, are familiar with in the New York City area, right? We had a wildfire in New York not too long ago, right? So this is not just a California thing. This is a worldwide thing, right? This is happening worldwide, right? So every day, I want you guys to think and understand and realize that what we're doing, we're not just making another phone call to make some money. We're not just trying to save someone some, $100 or a couple of dollars on their electricity bill. I want you guys to see yourself as everyday superheroes, all right? Because your children's children will literally thank you for what you're doing today, right? And that's what came to mind to me 10 years ago when I had this client tell me that, she didn't care what the price was, right? She wanted to play her part. And that's when I knew I was a part of something much bigger than what I thought, right? So environmental reasons, right? So we're familiar with the wildfires. I don't want to go on and on about that, but also the melting of the ice glaciers and things of that nature as well. So my point is, when you speak to a client and they say, you know what, environmental reasons are very important to me, well, you want to make sure that you have some research, or not some research, but some documentation, right? To know a couple of tips to help you with that conversation with them, right? And you can look that up on your own and see. I'll put maybe an article or two out to for you guys to see and get a better understanding of that. But I think I've driven my point home with the environmental perspective, right? So that's one perspective why someone would actually want to go solar, right? Another very clear perspective, of why someone would want to go solar would be for the savings, right? And that's very clear, right? So I know most consultations, a lot of people, they stress the point of solar, savings. And, in most cases, it's true, right? But you'll hear a lot of people looking to, but it kind of goes into more depth, right? So there's savings from a monthly perspective, right? So some people, their only focus is going to be, okay, I'm paying $200 a month today. How much will I be paying now that I have solar? And if you show them that they'll be paying 150, done. Right? That's all they need to see, right? Because that's their focus. If that's their focus, that's the conversation you want to have with them. And that's what you want to focus on, right? There's also yearly savings, right? So in one of the presentations that we do, it talks about a monthly bill of $250 a month, right? And how that homeowner for a year would be paying $3,000, right? But now going solar, now their bill is 150, and now they're paying roughly about $1,500, right? A month in savings, right? So about $1,500 in savings, right? A year, right? Now, here's what I want you to think about that. It's $1,500 in savings for year one, but year two is probably going to be about 160, I'm sorry, $1,600 in savings, right? Because you got to remember the utility rates increase, the solar rates don't, right? So the year three, we're talking about $1,700 in savings. So you might be able to speak someone's language when they're talking about savings from a yearly basis and not necessarily from a monthly basis, right? So you got to be able to identify that when you're having these conversations, right? And like I said, this is not pertaining to any specific market, right? Whether you're talking to a cold market or your best friend, they're going to say one of these target words, right? Where they have some type of focus, right? And then that's where you want to focus on, right? In addition to that, savings from from a whole system perspective, or let's say 25-year perspective, right? So, and I love doing this, and this is how I'm doing my consultations now, because I want to get and make it engaging, right? So I want you guys, everyone on the line right now, if you have a calculator next to you, and let's say you're on your computer, and you have your phone next to you, I want you don't have to tell me, right? But I want you to know what your monthly electricity bill is from the utility, right? And I want you to do this. This is what I do on all consultations, right? Let's just say now you know that number for you, but let's just say that number is $100, right? So I want you to do your number times 12, right? Right. So for me, in my example, it would be 1200. Right? And then times that number, 1200 times 25 over the next 25 years, right? And literally, when a client does this, they get a chance to literally see themselves how much they will be paying for electricity over the next 25 years, right? And this is a big deal because most people don't think about how much they pay for electricity on a 25-year time frame. Right? So this might be someone's focus when you bring it to their attention, because someone tell me that number that they got. What? Someone? Yes, Miss Wynn.
I have
30,000.
31,500, but that does not include um going up 6%, but just straight numbers is 31,500.
Absolutely. Right. It doesn't, and I want you guys to hear what Ms. Wynn just said. It doesn't even include the 6% increase. Right? Now, I know she knows because she may have heard it, a couple of times in the consultations and things of that nature, but most clients don't, I didn't even get to that yet. So when they add that 6% over another 25 years, it even increases even more, right? Now, let's say that number, from Ms. Wynn was, let's say it came up to 35,000, right? Now, that's the price for electricity with your utility bill, right? Now, if I showed her the cost of a whole cash solar system of 22,000, right? You see the big gap in the difference between your utility and your solar system. So some people may look at solar from that perspective, right? What's the overall price, right? And mind you, I'm not telling you to answer that question when someone asks you, right? You're not the goal shouldn't be to give out any numbers or figures when they ask you. But this is something for you to know and have in your back pocket so you can now carve the conversation in a direction that works in your favor for you to book the appointment or for you to close that deal, right? This is making sense? All right, perfect. So once again, that's the savings. And I like to say that's the wholesale price of what the system costs if you are buying it wholesale, right? Or just all cash, right? So that's from the savings perspective, right? Now, I do want to show this example because I gotta look for it real quick, but it'll take a second. But the next one is incentives, right? Actually, no, I'm gonna bring on a guest speaker for this one. All right, so incentives, right? So incentives, obviously, all homeowners that qualify for the finance, right, are able to take advantage of a 30% federal income tax credit, right? So some people call it incentives, some people call it rebates, and there are differences. There are rebates, there are incentives, there are grants in certain areas, right? But overall, the incentive package for each and every state is going to draw a lot of attention. And this is why also homeowners go solar. So if you hear someone say, you know what, I heard about solar, solar's great. What's the incentives in my state? Right? Ideally, you want to have that in mind, right? Now, I just want you to think about this. I did a consultation for Ms. Johnson, and before I did the consultation, she made sure that I knew the incentives in that state. Why? Because she knew that it was going to be a selling point to the client, right? And it was going to add, it was it was going to be more of a selling point, right, to the client. So she wanted to make sure that I mentioned it, right? I looked it up, and it was in the presentation, and it worked, right? Or when I say it worked, it made sense. You know what I mean? So it was an additional, I believe, $5,000 that the client was able to take advantage of on top of the 30% federal income tax credit, just because of the state. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that state was South Carolina. It was federal 30% and in addition to another 5,000 from the state, right? So you want to be able to speak that language. Now, think about this. Ms. Johnson probably, uh, was able to book that appointment off of the knowledge of knowing the incentives in her state, right? In addition to this person being a friend, trusted, referral source, so on and so forth. But because she knew the, incentives, obviously it worked out in her favor. Ms. Johnson, do you want to just add anything to that briefly, if you don't mind? I'm sorry.
I was having a hard time finding my unmute button.
No
Yeah,
problem.
yeah. Well, you expressed that perfectly well, but it is, so important to know because it's like, when we're out here sharing what we have, it's sort of like we're going fishing. And so these incentives and looking for people's reasons are the bait because the goal for us is to bring them to the table. My goal is really not to sell solar. I mean, ultimately it is, but my goal is to get them in front of you or any other mentor that is, presenting. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that as well. And so we talked about incentives overall. We talked about the federal, right? We talked about the state. And once again, in certain areas, right, there's other incentives. So I remember actually speaking to Mr. John about this the other day that I did a consultation in Idaho. It was actually for, let's see, is he on the line? Mr. Johnson. Philip Johnson. Not sure if he's on the line here, but I did a consultation for someone in Idaho. And I wasn't even aware of all of the incentives that they got a chance to take advantage of. But I was blown away because it was incentive on top of incentive on top of incentive. So this client basically got about 55% back of their overall system just due to the incentives. And I wanted to show you guys an example of this in more detail. But this is actually a solar savings report in New York City. So this is obviously somewhere that I know, I'm very familiar with, so on and so forth. But the reason why I show you this is due to the situation of, I want you to look here, right? On number 2. Can everyone see my screen here? So actually, let's go through this, right? So this is number 1. They have Con Ed, right? This is the example that I kind of just went over, right? So they're paying $350 a month. That times 12 is 42. 4,200 times 25 years is 105,000 plus the 5 to
Wow.
10% increase. Basically $113,000 that they're paying over that 25-year period with their utility company. Now, what's funny is that I heard someone say, wow, that's the exact reaction that I want the client to have, right? Because that leads right into step number 2, right? Now, how I explain it, and just bear with me as I go through this. The overall system price, as I just mentioned, is $61,000, 61,344. I always tell my clients, if you compare this to the number right here, if you bought the system out cash, obviously you're basically paying, you're saving roughly $60,000, roughly a little under 60, right? Quite a bit, or 50 something, right? A lot of money is my point. But most importantly, for this specific example, I want you to take a look at the New York City incentives, right? So there's a nice CERTA incentive, right, which is roughly 1,500. The federal income tax credit, which is 30%, another $5,000 state incentive, and then another property tax abatement that comes off, right? So reason why I'm showing you all of this is because look at the net cost here and then look what they would be paying with their utility company. So I want you guys to understand it's important to know and understand the incentive packages that are available in your state, right? Because if you know them, you can use these as leverage, right? And I know I mentioned other incentives. So in New York, there's a NYSERDA incentive. In New York, there's a property tax abatement, right? So these are things that we use to, push that homeowner over the line, right? Because obviously, as you can see, there's a lot of savings, right? So once again, just showing you this example so you get a better understanding of what incentives can do, because you are going to have some clients and one of the first things that they're going to say is, oh yeah, I heard you can get money back, I heard you can get grants, I heard you can get this. Okay, well, now you want to be able to speak that language, right? So incentives is definitely a perspective that you want to come or an angle, I should say, that you can come at clients to speak their language. So that's incentives. I think I drove the point home with that as well, right? Now, other reasons of why some people might want to go solar would be because of ownership, right? So they just want to be able to be in a position where they can own the system. So here's what that sounds like, you know, yeah, I'm tired of paying my electricity bill. It keeps on going up. I wish I could just be in a situation where I could own my own electricity, right? Perfect. This is what the client is saying. Now you know how to speak their language. Perfect, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner. By going solar, you can now be in a position where you can own your own electricity, right? You literally allowed them to tell you how to sell them, right? But in order to get to this point, you got to ask questions and you got to listen. You got to listen, right? You can't be too, excited about speaking too much or impressing them with your brilliance, because then you won't know how to actually, book the appointment, right? You won't know what that target or that trigger is for them, right? So ownership is a very big one, and that's one that we speak about a lot here, right? The difference between renting your electricity with the utility company and then ownership of it, right? So it's a big deal. You want to make sure you know that language. But then also leasing, right, is another, not is another target word, right? And everyone's situation is different. But some homeowners may be in a better situation to lease the system than to own it, right? And let's just see, is my buddy on the call? He's not on the call. James Meadows, right? I think we had a consultation the other day, and he mentioned, it was with the older couple. I believe the gentleman was 83 years old, and he asked me, what did he ask me? Or I told him, this one, I already know the perspective that we're going to talk to him about. And he was like, what? And I said, we're going to bring up the lease, right? Why? And James asked me why. Why would you talk about the lease? Well, I mentioned that once again, the client told us that he's 83 years old, right? And he's not interested in taking out a loan, but he wants to save money on his bill. Well, that's exactly what the lease does, right? And then James asked me, okay, well, why the lease over the finance? And I basically told him, well, the client just told us why, right? He's 83. He doesn't want to take out a loan, right? But he wants to save money. That's exactly what the lease does, right? And my point, and just to also add to that, I don't usually, and this might be a good thing for those as well, I don't usually say lease, because when people think lease, they think it's less than, they start thinking like a car or maybe something like that. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not owning it, so that's problematic. And they think it's something worse than it actually is. So I actually use the word exchange, right? It's not a lease, it's an exchange. What's an exchange? Well, it's exchanging your utility company to a solar company. That's it, right? It's literally that simple, right? Instead of paying the utility company $100 a month, and that $100 this year being $110 next year, then $120 a year later, and so on and so forth, you're exchanging to solar right? Where you'll be paying $80 a month for the next 25 years. How does that sound, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner? Sounds good. Perfect. Simple, right? So once again, I'm not trying to, showcase my brilliance with the client, because here's another part of this, right? This is why sometimes it may be a little bit challenging to, uh, teach on certain things, because it's like it's not that people don't want you to know, and specifically when it comes to solar, it's not that people don't want you to know, it's that we don't want you to say too much before booking the appointment, because the more you say, it could actually work against you, right? So the goal is to keep things literally as simple and kind of condense the thought to what the other listener or the client is hearing, right? Speak their language, right? So for instance, most people don't know what a solar lease is. So this is why I don't like talking about it, right? And I don't want to, because when you say a solar lease, then they start to ask you to explain it. Am I leasing the panels? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? Is it like leasing a car? Do I have to give it back in 5 years? All of this stuff. And they start to confuse themselves, and then they don't book the appointment, right? So a lease is an exchange, right? You're exchanging your electricity bill with a solar bill at a lower, flat, steady rate. Done. Right? So I think I drove that point home. But yeah, in addition to leasing, uh, also basically having a flat rate, right? So you may hear some people say, my bill is extremely high in the summertime, right? I'm tired of paying these high summer bills, right? I don't want to be sitting in my house sweating all day, right? But I'm tired of paying these, high electric bills. So a flat rate is kind of like speaking their language. That will help you book the appointment, one, but hopefully also cross them over. And that's what a lease or an exchange can do as well. So that's a different perspective, right? So another perspective is, and we may hear about this one a few different times, but basically having the panels on the roof and then off the roof. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's see. Do I have one of my other friends on the line today? Let's see. Is she here? She's not on the line either. No problem. Right. So I had a consultation with, Dr. George's uncle today. And basically, I wish he was on the line to explain it, but his main goal was, I don't want the panels on the roof. I need a ground mount, right? So that was his determining factor of whether even having a consultation was, does it have to be on my roof? If it has to be on my roof, I don't want to even talk. If it can be on a ground mount, let's have a discussion, right? So because we can do ground mounts, we were able to have that discussion with him, go over the whole plan. He sees it. It makes a lot of sense. Now, the plan is roughly $150,000, so it's a pretty big system. But the point is that now he went from not knowing to knowing, educated, and now he can make an educated decision. But to even get to that point, his breaking or not his breaking point, but his deal breaker was if it was or wasn't going to be on a roof. So know that, right? The fact that we can do ground mounts, right? The fact that, in certain situations, we can do somewhat of a carport, right? Right. So basically it's an extended ground mount, right? So it goes up roughly about, and I don't want to over explain this and get into all of the, logistics of it, but basically it goes up about 8 feet, and you can drive your car underneath it, right? So you can use it as a car port, right? But my point is, we have these options for those clients who want that, right? So what I'm saying is, you want to just know a little bit about this, and hopefully I'm sharing a few different details so it gives you some ammo when you're out in the field speaking to people. You can once again speak their language and say, you know what, we do have this, we do have that, we can help you with this, we can help you with that, right? So that's definitely a perspective. And let me give you a personal situation, right? So my brother and my sister-in-law, they live in New Jersey. They have a very specific, one of those fancy roofs, right? It's a fancy roof. But long story short, in order to do solar, they would have had to redo their whole roof, right? And that would have been $18,000, right? So solar went from being a great idea to not so much of a great idea because of the $18,000 re-roof that they had to do, right? That they weren't expecting. So what we had to do is go back to the drawing board and reevaluate the situation. So by reevaluating the situation, I said, what can I do? Right. So any problem I come up with, I always ask myself, what can I do? I don't care about what I can't do. What can I? Because that's what we need to focus on. Right. So I started looking at their land. We couldn't use the roof. Right. So I started looking at their property, and they had space, a little bit of space in the front to put a ground mount, but that wasn't practical, right? They have a corner house. Uh, Someone probably is not going to want to have a ground mount on a corner house. People can run up to it, throw things at it. That's not really practical. So that wasn't really an ideal situation. So I kept thinking, 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 and then I called Freedom up myself, and I said, listen, we can do a ground mount. That's great. But how about putting a ground mount on their driveway and extending the ground mount 8 feet, right? Once again, that's a carport, right? I asked Freedom that. They said we can do it. And this is what I went back to my brother and sister-in-law and said, hey, would this work? And they said, you know what? We didn't think about that. Not only would that work, but can we now also get an electric EV charger, right? Because once again, if we're going to have a carport, right, that we can park our cars underneath, that's going to help us when it's raining, when it's snowing. That's great. It's going to generate electricity. That's also great. But we can park the car and charge it right under the solar system carport, right? So literally, once again, I didn't have that ammo back then, but I researched it because I was thinking what I can do instead of thinking what I couldn't, right? And I didn't let any limitations stop me with that situation. So that's more of a personal development, conversation. But my point is, you just want to know and have as much ammo and think what we can do so we can figure out. It's so funny because in this industry, or as a solo consultant, I find myself being more of a problem solver for the client than anything else. Their problem is high electricity bill. Their problem is, solar looks good, but I don't know, actually solar sounds good, but it doesn't look good, right? So now I need to figure out where I need to place the panels so they don't see it and solve their problem. Problem after problem after problem after problem. But, we all get paid based on the proportion of problems that we solve, right? So it's just a different mindset when we go into things, right? So another perspective that you'll hear from when dealing with clients, right? So extra work needed, right? So what do I mean when I say extra work needed, right? Well, I closed the deal for Hans's Hans's uncle, right? And actually that was a let me re-show you actually again, right? Let me show you how good sometimes the benefits of solar are, right? Okay, okay, it's cool. So yeah, this is Hans's uncle, right? And once again, we went through the incentives, right? So now this is his monthly payment, so on and so forth. But not only did he go solar, right? But he wanted to go solar because he needed a new roof, right? So the main focus for him wasn't even the solar, it was the roof. His uncle called and asked, "Hey, can we do roofing? I need help with roofing." And Han said, "Not only can we do the roof, but we can also do solar. You should look in both, having both done at the same time." Right? So we turned a roofing client into a solar client, right? Because that was his perspective, right? And I want you to look at this. We're having the roof done and solar. This is what he'll be paying per month, 261 instead of 350 with his utility company. So with the solar and the roof, he's paying less than what he would currently be paying with his utility company. This is the power of what we're doing every day, right? once again, paying roughly about $100 less, 90, right? About, what is that, 89, $89 less, with solar and a roof than what he would be paying with his own utility company, right? And that was the angle. So the angle had everything to do with his roof, right? First, right? And then solar second. But once again, we were able to do both in one job, right? So once again, you want to know that up front that we can actually do roofing, right? But in addition to roofing, we can also do electrical work. So you might speak to a client. Now, this is, it's not as big of an issue, but you may speak to a client and they may need a main panel upgrade, right? So that might be one of the objections that they have before moving forward, or even with the roof, right? I hear this all the time. So yeah, I want to go solar, but I got to do my roof first, right? Well, guess what? That used to be an objection, but today it's not an objection anymore because we could do solar and roofing. So we can actually help you out and possibly have you have a lower solar bill with the roof and solar than what you're currently paying now. That's how does someone say no to that? They can't, right? And once again, this is what we're doing for people on a day-to-day basis. So that's another perspective, right? Well, let me bring it back up again, right? I want to show you guys the specifics. Another perspective, and I'll show you the same report, right? So now let's talk about here in this section, right? So someone may say, okay, it's a pitch roof, why so much of a high offset? Well, another perspective is future needs, right? So his uncle just bought this house, just bought the house. The house needs repairs, right? For the roof specifically. And as I consulted with the uncle, I said, your usage, now the uncle told me that 8 people live in the house. 8, right? So that's quite a few people in one house, no problem. But this was his usage for I think, what, 2 or 3 months. So I'm like, this is relatively low. You need to build you a much bigger system, right? So instead of 8 panels that would have covered his needs, we built a system for 16 panels for his future needs, right? What he would need in the future. This is why his offset is at 220%, right? So you may have some clients that say, you know what? Okay, this is how much electricity I'm using today, but I do plan on getting a swimming pool next year, right? I do plan on getting, a washer and dryer, right, next year, right? And okay, perfect. So we're gonna build a system for that specifically, and we're gonna focus on that because here's an easy way to focus on that, right? Okay, Mr. Homeowner, I know you're going to be using more electricity next year than you're currently using today, right? Would you think that you're going to be paying a lot more with your utility company with that extra electricity? Of course. So let's do this. Let's pre-set up, right, your solar system where we can lock in a rate, right, for a much lower amount than you paying that higher amount when you know your electricity is going to be much higher. Client said, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. Where do I sign? Right? Why? Because I'm focusing on his needs and I'm not focusing on my own. Right? Now, in some situations, this is where it makes sense to build a system that's bigger than what the client needs. Now, I say this because this is not to be taken advantage of, right? You may have some people who take advantage of the information and oversell systems so they can make a bigger commission, right? It's unethical, unnecessary, right? Our job is to help clients, not hurt them and harm them, right? And for that comment, I do want to bring someone on if she's available, because she asked me this question recently, right? And she asked me, what was how do I decide the pricing of a deal? And I thought it was a great question because, some people ask the question, but you can tell that they're asking more from a commission perspective and not from an understanding perspective, right? Sabrina actually asked me this question, but she asked for understanding, and to really, understand, what's the thought process of it. And Sabrina, can you hear me? Are you able to come off mute at all? Let's see if she is. If not, I'll explain it. All right, all right. I know it's I'm calling out I'm calling out of the blue here, but yes, basically I explained to her that I never look at a commission on a deal. Most times I have no idea what a commission is because that's not really my interest or my focus. Focus is always on the client. The commission is probably one of the last things I look at, right? And the reason why is because we have to focus on what the client's needs are first and foremost, more than anything else. Because if I go into, matter of fact, once again, I'll show you. All right. I like to be transparent and I like to show things. So let me do that. Give me 1 second. We have, pages all over the place. I'm trying to get this done in a timely fashion as well. But just give me 1 second. Let me share this with you guys real quick. All right. So this is the commission calculator, right? You guys can see this. Right. And yeah, so let's say I come here. Now I know this is going to be confusing, right? So don't try to understand, don't really try to get and understand all of it now. Yep. But if I come to the table and I put numbers in and I'm looking at these numbers first, and I'm not looking at how much the homeowner is going to save or what position they're going to be in, then I'm coming to the table with the wrong mindset. I'm coming to the table thinking about me and what I'm gonna spend this money on, what I'm gonna invest this money on, and all of these things I'm gonna do with the money without even considering the client first, right? So this is why you have some really interesting salespeople who, move and operate in a certain way because they come to the table thinking transaction instead of thinking help, right? And being of assistance and being of, bringing value, right? Another thing, right? I never worry about a deal closing, right? I always think about giving value to the client. So my job in a consultation is always to educate and consult, right? And I believe personally that the homeowner is smart enough to make the best decision for the household, right? I just need to do my part and I also need to let them do their part. No need to sell, right? Let me jump out of this, right? So if a homeowner is paying $100 a month and I can show them a clear way of how they'll be paying $70 a month with solar, once again, that doesn't need a sales pitch, right? It just needs understanding on how that's done. And they also need to be able to trust that when they do move forward, I'll be there for them for all of the questions, for the good times, right? Because clients don't call when they're saving, 50, 70, $80 a month. They don't call me, they don't send no bottles of wine, they don't do anything, right? But when something goes wrong, oh my God, I'm the first one that they call, whether it has something to do with solar or not. I'm still the first person to call, right? But they need to know that you'll be there anyway, whether it's your fault or not, right? I was telling someone this story the other day. I got a call on, I think it was either Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, right? One of my clients for over 5 years, her electricity went out, and she called. She thought it was something relative to solar, and she was like, "Oh, you guys got to get somebody out here. You got to get somebody out here." And I told her, "Listen, this probably has nothing to do with, solar, right? Sh- Basically, she has a lot more people over. I think some other family members, so on and so forth. So they were plugging things in, and it was tripping the system. That's an electrical issue, not a solar issue." So I explained this to her. Anyway, long story short, we had one of our guys come out the very next day. They explained what I explained to her. And then she called me the next day and she apologized. She said, "I'm so sorry for blaming you." She was upset, which is, natural on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve. But she said, "Thank you so much for answering my call. Thank you so much for having someone come out," right? Because it just shows that you're there and you care, right? And once again, this is what we do. This is what we're about, right? I could have not answered. I could have said it's Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve. I don't have time for this. But my point is that I was there for her anyway, right? So anyway, I got off track. I apologize. But future needs, right? Another perspective is credit requirements, right? So for some homeowners, there's different credit requirements for different plans, whether you finance the system, whether you lease or exchange, or, you buy a system cash. So there's some clients who say, listen, right? And I dealt with a few of them before. My credit is not great, right? But I can buy the system today, right? How much is it? Let me just write a check, right? And now, okay, I need to be able to know that so I can speak that language, but I need to know all of the information from a cash perspective immediately, right? And now I can speak that language to say, okay, well, this is the option that you could take, if your credit is good, or this is the option you can take if the credit is not so good, right? These are the plans that we have, that where you may not even need a credit check, right? I know in New York City we have different plans and options where a homeowner doesn't even have to do a credit check to still take advantage of solar, right? And to be honest, this is where the industry is going, right? It's going that way in that direction, across the nation. So anyway, credit requirements, right? Something to know. As I kind of speed through the rest of these, energy independence, right? Some homeowners are going to want to be energy independent, so they're going to want to have the solar panels. They're going to want to have the battery. They're going to want to take advantage of solar so they can be independent from the electricity grid. Pretty simple. So you'll hear them in that, and in their statements. I've had some clients who said, if I can't get a solar battery, then I don't want to take advantage of solar at all. Why? Because I want to be 100% independent. All right. So once again, that's an angle. And guess what? We offer solar. We also offer batteries. Right now, in some markets, batteries make a lot of sense. In some markets, it is a luxury item. So it's just good as someone speaking to clients, for you to know and have an idea about your market, right? Because some markets are in desperate needs of having a solar system with batteries, and then some others aren't so much, right? So it's just something to keep in mind. Obviously, battery storage, as I mentioned, blackout protection, right? Kind of just spoke about that. Some homeowners want to go solar because, they think that their home is being turned into a smart home. And that's another way of them upgrading their house, right? So, I had one client that said, the solar panels make my house look futuristic, right? So that was her main reasoning on going solar, right? It was upgrading her house to a smart home, right? And lastly, I'll say, another perspective of why homeowners go solar is from the aesthetic standpoint, right? So some people may not like the way the panels look on the roof, right? Some people may want the panels on the back. Some people may want the panels on the front. Some people may only want the panels on the side, right? So, you want to know that so you're able to speak their language, right? Because if someone only wants the panels on the back, I remember I did a consultation for, Carla Wynn. And if you remember, you can speak on it as well. But we had a client. Yeah, I'll let you touch on it briefly if you remember the situation.
Yes, they are part of a homeowners association, and the panels, they said they only wanted them on the back. And based on the conversation that we had, we showed them what it would be like with the panels, with the panels on the south side, which was on the front of the house, on the back side, which would be on the back of the house, the difference of percentage of what they would pay and also save on the energy bill with regard to both. And at the moment, because they have some other projects going on in their home, they decided not to move forward and potentially want to look at in the spring. So they said something about wanting to see how it would be with the trees and the shading and what. So that's where they are at the moment. So thank you very much for allowing me to share that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, once again, some clients, you'll realize that, they want the panels in a specific area. They don't want it to see it mainly from the street, basically, right? In the the good thing about it is that in most cases we can help with that, right? We can arrange the panels of where they on where they go, so maybe it doesn't need to be shown, right? But that will be potentially a reason why you do or don't book an appointment, right? So you want to be flexible with that. And once again, as you're booking the appointment, if you're just starting out in solar, you may not know how to answer all of these questions, and you don't have to. The goal is just knowing that there is some flexibility, and this is where you can refer to your solar specialist, right? You can say, "Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Homeowner, let me get it right back to you. Let me speak to my solar specialist," or you can even do a three-way with the solar specialist as well, right? So I really, really hope this was helpful and insightful for everyone on the line, just so you understand the different perspectives of how to get a solar appointment, book a solar appointment, and close a solar deal. I know it's right around 8 o'clock, but definitely wanted to know if anyone had any questions or thoughts that I can help answer and take care of.
Hey,
Any que-
Idris.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Victor here out of DC. Uh, so great presentation and information. I really do appreciate it. Give me a lot of information I can utilize as I become a pro. Um, but when you first initiate the conversation with the homeowner, what would be a what would be a good opening conversation to figure out exactly how you can help that customer from that small opening? Because sometimes price doesn't matter, sometimes location of the panels don't matter. Some things matter, some things don't. How do you start that conversation to get the information to make sure you're talking their language?
Yep. So yeah, and that's a great question, right?
Thank
What I would do is simple questions, and they're open-ended questions. They're not directed to anything specifically, right? So
uh,
it'll be more like, "Hey, Mr. Homeowner, have you ever looked into solar before?" They'll say yes or no, and then I'll ask another question. What do you know about it? What do you like about solar, right? And I'll get them talking, because the more
okay,
they talk, the more they'll tell you how to sell them, basically, right?
okay,
So yeah, I would ask the open-ended question, and I wouldn't direct it towards anything specific. Just let them tell you what they know about it, what they like about it, what they dislike about it. And then once you have that intel, you can now respond with, "Okay, well, oh, you like this? We can definitely do that. Oh, you don't like
yeah,
this? Oh, we don't do that. We don't do it that way." Or for instance, if they say, "You know what, I don't want to go solar because I don't want to lean on my property," you can educate them and say, "Well, solar doesn't put liens on property, right?
right,
Let me help
right,
you, get more educated by speaking to a solar specialist." And then you book the appointment that way, right? So
okay,
yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns at all?
thank you.
Absolutely.
Can you hear me, sir? It's Mr. Jones. You know I have background. You hear me
Yes,
clear?
sir. Yes, sir. No problem. Yep.
All right. Well, first and foremost, thank you, man. This has been very insightful. And, again, once again, it just goes to show that there's no cookie cutter way to do this occupation, to sell solar and so forth. And, and as you state throughout the whole call about speaking their language, learning their language. So you're more so you're going into this thing more defensive than offensive. It's not about going in for the close. Again, it's about educating and consulting. That's why everyone, that you've done a consultation with, you know, they don't feel like they've been soiled, like they got to take a shower. You know what I mean? It's like this has been clean and to the point, and I learned something today, and so forth. It's a very pleasant experience. So I definitely appreciate you sharing this information, and just coming from a different approach and um, driving home that we have to be flexible when consulting and sharing and doing this. So appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like Marva said, finding the pain, right? That's a very important. Whatever their pain is, we'll talk their solution, right? But in order to talk their solution, you gotta be in a position to hear the pain, right? You can't hear the pain if you're, telling them everything you know about solar. All right. So yeah, any other final questions before we jump off?
Sure. Ambrose Thomas out of Georgia.
Yes.
At anytime in your presentation or conversation, do you talk about a break-even point? How long does it take a customer or a client to break even where they don't necessarily have to be, still carrying the load of any sort of finance, and they just strictly just benefiting from the system? Because did you say that you work for Tesla?
Yeah, worked.
Works, yeah. So okay. So I know the warranty on Tesla, but I shouldn't say one, but I've read that the warranties are 175,000 miles, which is pretty good. But I also heard that that's the time that versus gasoline vehicles, that's the time that someone is breaking even after they ride up to 71, 75, 200,000 miles. So
Absolutely.
juxtaposition that with the system, when does a customer, I mean, not when, but does that conversation come up, or do you avoid it, or you only respond to it when a client or customer, present that type of questions to you?
Absolutely. And that's a great question as well. I don't avoid any questions, right? Once again, it's a consultation. It's my job to answer all the questions for the client. So there's no question that gets avoided ever, right? However, I will only bring up questions and concerns that the client has. So if the, buyback period, or, if that's not a concern, which usually doesn't come up, unless we're dealing
Uh,
with cash clients who are looking to buy the
mhm.
system today and know when they'll basically be kind of like free of charge, how soon
Yeah.
that time frame would be. If that question doesn't come up, then I don't jump into that. Because here's the reality. Once
Yep.
again, I said I don't avoid questions, but you don't know what can open up a can of chaos,
Generals. Absolutely. Yeah.
right? So you don't want to jump into that and then
That.
shoot yourself in the foot.
Minnesota.
But once
Yeah.
again, you want to elaborate your brilliance on on the client instead of
Yes.
answering questions and concerns that they had.
Excellent. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So once again, guys, I definitely greatly appreciate everyone jumping on. Hopefully this was helpful. I know we have the Millionaire Mentorship call this evening. So look forward to seeing everyone on. Take care, take charge, and I hope everyone has a great night. Bye-bye for now.
Good night.
All
Thank
right.
you.